She took one bite of her mother-in-law's gravy and knew it was poison. The bitter, metallic taste was a signature she had learned during her years as an FBI agent. Her mother-in-law, Dorothea, saw a pregnant, easy target. She did not see the woman who had survived 2 years undercover with the Russian mafia. This story is about what happens when a predator chooses the wrong prey. A single taste of poison at Thanksgiving dinner would unravel 40 years of dark family secrets. Stay with us, because the twist at the end is one you will never see coming. This is a story about trusting your instincts when everyone around you says you are crazy. It is about fighting back when the people who should protect you become your greatest threat. And it is proof that the truth, no matter how long it takes, will always find its way into the light. Dorothea Hartwell smiled as she passed the gravy. "I made this special, just for you," she said. 22 pairs of eyes turned to Vivian. The grand dining room at the Hartwell estate was filled with the warm scent of turkey and spice. Vivian, 7 months pregnant and exhausted from a recent kidnapping case, just wanted to be home. But her husband, Grant, had insisted family Thanksgiving was not optional. So there she sat, feeling like a sausage in her maternity dress, surrounded by Grant's perfect family. "Thank you, Dorothea," Vivian said, with a warm voice, and for 3 years her mother-in-law had perfected a sweet cruelty, where every compliment was a hidden insult. The gravy boat landed in front of Vivian. Dark steam curled into the air. "A new recipe," Dorothea announced. "You need your strength, dear. Growing my grandchild takes so much out of a woman." Vivian noticed the emphasis on "my grandchild," as if she were just a vessel. She had learned to ignore these small cuts, but tonight felt different. She poured the dark gravy over her potatoes. It smelled of herbs and meat, but also something else, something sharp and metallic. Across the table, Grant gave her a loving smile, completely unaware. Vivian lifted the fork to her mouth. The moment the food touched her tongue, her FBI training took over. This was not a cooking herb. This was poison. She swallowed the tiny amount to avoid suspicion and forced herself to take one more small bite. Across the table, Dorothea watched her every move with cold anticipation. She watched like a spider observing a fly. Vivian squeezed her husband's hand under the table, their secret signal that meant she needed to talk to him urgently. "Excuse me," she announced calmly. "The baby is pressing on my bladder again." Polite laughter went around the table. "Of course, dear," Dorothea said, her smile fixed in place. "We'll save your plate." In the hallway, generations of Hartwell family portraits stared down at her. She was not among them. Once inside the bathroom, she locked the door and moved quickly. She spat the food into the toilet and rinsed her mouth repeatedly, forcing herself to bring up what little she had swallowed. Her hands shook as she pulled a small evidence bag from her purse, a habit from her undercover days. She scraped the residue from her tongue, sealed it in the bag, and wrote the date and time, November 28th, 6:47 in the evening. Her pale, tired face stared back from the mirror. Her mother-in-law had just tried to poison her. The thought was insane, but her instincts, the same instincts that kept her alive for years, were screaming that it was true. The baby kicked, a hard reminder of what was at stake. Dorothea was not just a difficult woman. She was a murderer. Vivian tucked the evidence bag away, fixed her lipstick, and put on a calm smile. She walked back to the dining room with steady steps and sat down. The dinner conversation continued. But for Vivian, the hunt had just begun. My mother-in-law was trying to poison me, and my husband was completely oblivious. It all started at Thanksgiving dinner, a perfect meal hiding a terrible secret. I couldn't touch the food on my plate, especially the gravy Dorothea made. It tasted bitter, wrong. To avoid suspicion, I pushed my food around, a trick I learned as a child to survive dinners With my alcoholic father, Dorothea watched my every move, a satisfied smile on her face. She asked how the gravy was. I lied and said it was delicious, the lie tasting worse than the poison itself. She just beamed, saying she wanted everything to be perfect for her sons, and of course, her grandchild. She placed a hand on her stomach, a perfect imitation of a proud grandmother. But I saw through the act. After 4 years as an FBI profiler, I knew a performance when I saw one. Her eyes never matched her smile. Under the table, my husband Grant squeezed my hand, asking if I was okay. I looked at him, then at the family portrait on the wall where my face was still missing after 3 years of marriage. I was a placeholder, a Hartwell in name only. "I'm fine," I whispered, but nothing would ever be fine again. For the rest of the dinner, I dodged every dish, blaming it all on morning sickness. On the long drive home, Grant noticed my silence. He asked if the baby was okay. I just watched the streetlights pass, their rhythm matching my anxious heartbeat. I told him I was just tired from a recent case. He then mentioned that his mom noticed I barely ate. Of course she did. She was counting every bite I did not take. I repeated my excuse about morning sickness, which was an easy answer for him. Grant saw the world in simple terms. His mother loved him, so she was good. He did not understand that love could be used as a weapon. As he turned up the Christmas music, I pressed a hand to my belly. My baby moved, and I made a silent promise to protect her, no matter what it took. The evidence bag in my purse felt like a ticking bomb. Tomorrow, I would have proof. And then, I would do what I always do when something is wrong. I would investigate. That night, I could not sleep lying next to a peaceful Grant. He was the man I fell in love with 5 years ago, long before I knew what his family was truly like. At 2:14 in the morning, I gave up and went downstairs. The kitchen was dark and cold. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. I kept picking it up and putting it down, my hands shaking. Finally, I opened the browser, and my thumb typed in the words, ethylene glycol taste. My heart pounded as the results loaded. It was described as sweet at first, then bitter. It was antifreeze. I read that it causes kidney failure within 72 hours, with symptoms often mistaken for the flu. My hands trembled as I typed my next search. Antifreeze poisoning symptoms. Nausea, seizures, coma, death. Then came the one search I dreaded most. Can antifreeze hurt an unborn baby? The answers were horrifying. Fetal death, birth defects. I finally understood. The next morning was Black Friday. While the world fought over discounted televisions, I drove 2 hours out of the city. Grant had gone golfing, telling me to rest and take care of our little one. I arrived at the FBI field office, an unremarkable building you would never notice. My former partner, Margot Dawson, met me in our usual spot in the parking garage, a camera-blind spot we used for sensitive talks. "You look like hell," she said, holding a coffee. "Good morning to you too," I replied. Her teasing stopped when she saw my face. She knew this look. It was the face I wore when something unthinkable had happened. She did not ask questions. After 7 years together, she did not need to. "Follow me," she said simply. We walked through quiet back hallways to the lab. It was mostly empty because of the holiday. Dr. Lydia Brennan was there, running samples. She congratulated me on the pregnancy and asked what I needed. I took a deep breath. "I need a favor," I said. A rush analysis, completely off the record. Lydia's warm smile vanished, replaced by a professional focus. "What am I looking for?" she asked. "Imagine your own family trying to murder you over Thanksgiving dinner. That's the nightmare Vivian found herself in. And this is the story of how she fought for her life and the life of her unborn child." She handed her friend, Lydia, a small plastic bag containing a sample of gravy. She knew the bitter taste meant poison, but she needed proof. Lydia, a scientist, saw the look on her face. She promised to have the first results in just 4 hours. Vivian's fear was terrifyingly real. Someone wanted her dead. Later, with her colleague Margot, Vivian tried to explain the unexplainable. My mother-in-law, Dorothea, made special gravy just for me, she said. In 3 years, she has never once asked what I like. But yesterday, she watched every bite I took. Margot pointed out that strange behavior was not evidence of a crime. Vivian shook her head. I spent 2 years in chemical operations, she insisted. I know the taste of poison. I know what she did. The truth always comes at a price. When Lydia called, her voice was shaking. Vivian was sitting alone in her car, her world about to shatter. The call confirmed her worst fear. The lab results were positive for a lethal dose of antifreeze. It was a cold, calculated attempt on her life. The amount you ate was designed to cause total kidney failure, Lydia explained. The words hit Vivian like a physical blow. Then came the most devastating part. In a pregnant woman, Lydia continued softly, it would affect the fetus first. A miscarriage within 48 hours, followed by your own death. Her own family had tried to kill her baby. The betrayal was absolute. A short time later, her husband Grant called. He was happy and cheerful after a day of golf, completely unaware of the horror that had unfolded. Mom wants us to come over for leftovers, he said. The sound that escaped Vivian's throat was sharp and broken. How could she tell him his mother had tried to murder her? Just come home, Grant, she managed to say. We need to talk right now. She waited for him in the dark, the damning lab report sitting on the coffee table. The evidence was proof of an unspeakable act. Her mother-in-law, the respected society woman, had tried to kill her to get rid of her and her grandchild. Vivian placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle movement of her baby. She made a silent promise to protect her child, no matter the cost. When Grant finally walked in, he was confused by the darkness. Vivian's voice stopped him cold. Sit down, she said. She pushed the lab report across the table. She watched as he read the words, as the color drained from his face, and his world began to fall apart. She saw his perfect image of his family being destroyed by the truth. Your mother served me poison yesterday, Vivian said, her voice steady and clear. She gave me enough antifreeze to kill me and our baby. Grant stared at the report, his hands trembling. The proof was undeniable, written in cold, scientific language. But the truth was too monstrous for him to accept. My mother wouldn't do that, he stammered, shaking his head. She couldn't. He looked from the paper to his wife, his eyes filled with a desperate plea for it to be a mistake. But Vivian's expression was unwavering. The battle for her life, and for the truth, had just begun. He would have to choose between the family he knew and the family they were supposed to become. There has to be another explanation, Grant insisted, his voice filled with desperation. Maybe the gravy was contaminated. Vivian's response was cold and precise. Grant, ethylene glycol does not just appear in food. Someone deliberately put poison in the gravy that only I was served. He let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. You actually think my mother tried to murder you? Do you hear how insane that sounds? She met his gaze without flinching. I am a federal agent. I analyze facts for a living. And the fact is, the lab results show poison. Someone put antifreeze in my meal, she stated again, her voice even. I am asking you to consider the person who prepared that meal. Grant's voice cracked. You want me to believe my own mother tried to kill my wife and our unborn child? That is completely crazy. The word stung. Do not call me crazy, she warned him. He ran a hand through his hair. There has to be another reason. She stood up to face him directly. Then explain it. Explain how poison ended up only in my portion. Explain the strange look your mother gave me with every bite I took. For years I have studied psychopaths, Grant. I can recognize a performance. Your mother is hiding something behind that loving smile. She could see the conflict tearing him apart. Part of him knew she was right. His shaking hands betrayed him, but he could not abandon the lifelong image of his perfect mother. I have to call her, he said at last. She deserves a chance to explain. Vivian felt a wave of defeat, but simply nodded. He needed to hear the lie for himself. Grant switched the phone to speaker. On the third ring, Dorothea answered, her voice sickeningly sweet. Grant, darling, how was your game? He got straight to the point. Mom, I need to ask you about the gravy you made for Vivian. There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause. Of course, sweetheart. What about it? He looked at Vivian, who gave a slight nod. She said it tasted strange, Dorothea's voice filled with fake hurt. But I made it just for her, something special for the mother of my first grandchild. I know, Mom, Grant said. But she had it tested. A heavy silence hung in the air for 4 long seconds. Tested? Dorothea's voice was suddenly cold. Tested for what? Vivian moved closer. The test found ethylene glycol, she announced clearly. Enough antifreeze to cause complete organ failure. After another long pause, Dorothea's tone shifted again, becoming gentle and condescending. Sweetheart, I would never hurt you. You are carrying my grandchild. The lab obviously made a terrible mistake. These things happen. I personally supervise the analysis, Vivian countered. Well, there you have it, Dorothea said, her voice like smooth poison. You are under so much stress, dear. Pregnancy and your difficult job can make the mind play tricks. To Vivian's horror, Grant began to nod in agreement. Pregnancy hormones can cause severe anxiety, even paranoia, Dorothea went on. A friend's daughter-in-law had a total breakdown and had to be institutionalized. The message was clear. Grant looked at his wife with new suspicion. Maybe some time off work would be good for you. I need you to believe me, Vivian pleaded, her voice tight with emotion. Grant's face was a mask of pain, caught between his wife and his mother. I believe something happened, he said slowly, but not that my mother did it. She loves us. She loves the baby. Vivian's voice finally broke. The baby is just an it to you now. I am just the vessel, exactly like your mother always says. Later that night, Vivian sat alone in her car, staring at the warm lights of the home they built together. She could not bear to look at the man who had chosen his mother's lies over her evidence. She placed a hand over her stomach, feeling the restless kick of her daughter. She remembered her old life as an undercover agent, a woman who could survive impossible situations. But this felt different. She knew she was not crazy. The lab report on the coffee table was proof. When she finally went inside, Grant was asleep on the couch. She covered him with a blanket, looking at the face of the boy she had fallen in love with. But men make choices, and he had made his. In bed, she was haunted by the memory of their wedding day and Dorothea's chilling toast. We will make a proper Hartwell of you yet, Dorothea had promised. At the time, everyone had laughed. Vivian now knew it was never a joke. Dorothea wanted her gone. The next morning, a note on the counter said Grant had gone to his mother's house to talk. Vivian crumpled it and threw it away. He could believe the lies. She had work to do. A woman like Dorothea does not just start with attempted murder. There is always a pattern, and Vivian was determined to find it. She opened her laptop and began to dig. Dorothea's life was unremarkable until 1982. That was the year she married Richard Hartwell, a man old enough to be her father and one of the wealthiest men in the state. 5 years later, at age 46, Richard Hartwell died from kidney failure. There was no autopsy. Vivian felt a chill run down her spine. It was the same symptom caused by antifreeze. She kept digging and found another. In 1994, Dorothea's brother-in-law also died at 46. The cause was organ failure. And again, no autopsy was performed. Just weeks after he had denied Dorothea alone, Vivian found a third man, David Porter, a member of the Family Foundation's board. He died in 2003 at the age of 52 from sudden organ failure. 6 weeks before his death, he had voted against one of Dorothea's proposals. 3 deaths, all benefiting Dorothea, all with symptoms of poisoning, all ruled natural causes. She immediately called her old partner, Margot. "It is a pattern," Vivian explained. 3 people are dead, all connected to Dorothea, and now she is trying to make me number 4. The realization was horrifying. Her mother-in-law was a serial killer. By Monday morning, Margot had the files. They met at a quiet coffee shop where Margot slid a thick folder across the table, her face grim. "It is not just deaths," Margot said quietly. The folder was filled with old records. In 2004, Grant's college girlfriend was hospitalized with a mysterious stomach illness. She broke up with him soon after. Then his fiancée before Vivian suddenly developed severe anxiety and panic attacks. She called off the wedding and moved away. The terrifying pattern was undeniable. Vivian stared at the file her friend Margot had assembled. A nanny, fired in 1991 after a sudden, debilitating illness. Another ex-employee who refused to speak about the family. Grant's former fiancée, Samantha, who died by suicide in 2015, only 3 years after she ended the engagement. The list grew longer. A maid, a gardener, a private chef. All of them became seriously ill while working for the Hartwells. All left their jobs quietly. And all of them had a direct connection to Dorothea. My husband thinks I'm having a mental breakdown. His mother, Dorothea, convinced him it is just the pregnancy hormones. The truth is much darker. For 36 years, his mother has been poisoning anyone who gets too close to her sons. A folder of evidence sits on my table, my coffee cold beside it. I feel my baby move, a tiny, determined kick. This is not just about me anymore. I will not be the next name on her list of victims. Dorothea has manipulated my husband his entire life, but that is no excuse for his blindness to her evil. I have to build a case so powerful that even he cannot ignore the truth. That night, Grant came home late, the faint scent of his mother's perfume clinging to his coat. He avoided my eyes, and I knew I was alone in this fight. I found peace in the pale, yellow nursery, rocking in the glider. I was no longer just a wife. I was an investigator with a mission. He would not believe me, so I would have to make him see. I thought about the women in those files, the ones who got sick, the ones whose careers were ruined, the one who took her own life. I thought of my sister-in-law, a hollowed-out version of a person after 6 years of marriage. I am not the crazy one, I whispered to the dark room. She is. The baby kicked again, as if in agreement. A genuine smile touched my lips for the first time in days. A fire was lit inside me, a purpose that warmed me against the coming winter. I was going to stop her. Exhaustion made me careless. 6 days after Thanksgiving, Grant found the files on the kitchen table. "What the hell is this?" he roared, his face red with anger. He held up a photo of an ex-girlfriend from 15 years ago. "You are investigating people I dated in college?" he demanded. "I am investigating a pattern," I said, my voice steady. He let out a harsh, broken laugh. "A pattern of my mother poisoning every woman I have ever cared about?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Exactly that." "You need professional help, Vivian," he said, his voice dangerously low. "What is not healthy," I countered, "is ignoring that your mother has killed 3 people and tried to kill me." He called it a conspiracy theory. I listed the dead. His father, dead at 46 from sudden kidney failure. His uncle, dead 6 weeks after a business dispute with Dorothea. For every victim, Grant had a convenient excuse. Everyone knew they were sick or that they had a problem. Another name from the foundation board, a healthy 52-year-old man, also dead in 6 weeks. "Stop it!" Grant yelled, slamming his hand on the counter. "I cannot stop." My voice was cold now. She tried to kill our baby, and I am going to prove it. The silence was suffocating. Then he delivered the final blow. "I spoke to my mother today," he said. He had told her everything. He showed me the texts she sent, listing all the people I had contacted for my investigation. "Your job is to catch criminals," he said. "Not create them from paranoid fantasies about my mother." Paranoid fantasies. The words hit me like a physical blow. This man, my husband, was using the oldest trick in the book to dismiss me. "Get out," I whispered, my heart shattering. "Get out of this house right now. You just looked at all this evidence and called me paranoid. You are choosing her." He suggested staying at his parents' house for a few days to give us space. I just nodded. The sound of his suitcase zippering shut was the sound of our marriage ending. At the door, he paused. "I love you," he said, "but this is destroying us." I said nothing. The sweep of his car's headlights cut through the living room, and then he was gone. I was left alone with the proof that the man I married would never believe me. I slid to the cold floor and stayed there until the sun came up. At 8:17 that morning, my phone rang. It was my supervisor from the FBI, Agent Russell Kincaid. His voice was rough. "Hartwell, my office, now." When I reminded him I was on maternity leave, he just repeated my name and the line went dead. I drove to the field office in a complete daze. The building was nearly empty for the holidays. I knew this was not a social call. I knew this was trouble. Her boss shut the door to his office. "I received a complaint yesterday," he said, his voice grim. It was anonymous. It claims one of my agents is abusing her position and using federal resources to pursue a personal vendetta. Vivian kept her expression neutral, but her heart was racing. The complaint specifically alleges that this agent is harassing citizens because she has a delusion that her mother-in-law is a serial killer and is trying to invent evidence to prove it. "My mother-in-law is a serial killer who has murdered people for 3 decades. Vivian's voice was steady, presenting the facts to her boss. But she was met with Dorotha's counterattack. A complaint filed against her for building an unofficial case. Her boss, Kincaid, looked tired. He told her she was one of his best agents, that her work was exceptional. But this investigation into her own family was a delusion. Still, the evidence was undeniable. The gravy sample tested positive for ethylene glycol. Someone was poisoning people, and Vivian knew exactly who it was. Kincaid rubbed his temples. He had no choice. He placed her on administrative leave, effective immediately. Internal Affairs would investigate everything. If she was right, they would find the truth. If she was wrong, her career was over. Vivian understood. She went home to an empty house. Her husband Grant's absence was a heavy silence in every room. Standing in the nursery they had built together, she stared at the mobile of stars and moons. It was a gift from her mother-in-law, Dorotha. The irony was suffocating. She remembered Dorotha's laugh, a sound that now felt like a memory from another lifetime. She couldn't sleep. Instead, Vivian found herself folding tiny baby clothes in the middle of the night. She picked up a soft, expensive cashmere onesie. It was another gift from Dorotha. She remembered the woman's smile at the baby shower, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The way she watched Vivian open it felt less like a gift and more like a test. Vivian thought of her own mother, a woman who had taught her to be strong and to fight back against injustice. Vivian clutched the white onesie, its perfect stitching, a symbol of the perfect facade her mother-in-law had built. She threw it in the trash. 2 days later, a sharp knockback echoed through the house. Vivian peered through the peephole and was shocked to see Carolyn Hartwell on her porch. Carolyn was her brother-in-law's wife, a woman who was usually as quiet and unnoticeable as a piece of furniture at family dinners. Vivian opened the door. "We need to talk," Carolyn said. Her voice was firm, completely different from her usual passive tone. Inside, they sat at the kitchen table where Vivian's life had fallen apart just days before. Carolyn wrapped her shaking hands around a coffee mug. Then she looked directly at Vivian and said the 3 words she desperately needed to hear. "I believe you." Vivian was stunned. After all the doubt and accusations, she never imagined that her quiet sister-in-law would be the one to stand by her side. "Why?" Vivian asked, her voice barely a whisper. A single tear rolled down Carolyn's cheek. "Because she did it to me too." The story came pouring out. 5 years of silenced pain, finally released. Carolyn explained that she and her husband, Preston, had gotten pregnant back in 2019. Dorotha did not approve. She made constant, subtle comments about how a baby would ruin Preston's career and how they should wait. When Carolyn was 12 weeks pregnant, she began feeling terribly sick. It was far worse than normal morning sickness. The doctors were not concerned at first, but just 2 weeks later, she miscarried. The doctors had no explanation. A few days after, while cleaning out the refrigerator, Carolyn found an old smoothie container. She had been making protein smoothies every morning, something Dorotha often praised her for. She was about to throw the container away when she noticed a strange residue at the bottom. Something made her stop and look closer. It smelled wrong. It was a sweet but chemical odor, just like antifreeze. "I saved it," Carolyn confessed, her voice trembling. She had tried to tell her husband, Preston, but he dismissed her fears. He said she was grieving and anxious, that his mother would never do such a thing. It was the same reaction Vivian got from Grant. Carolyn reached into her purse and pulled out a small plastic bag containing the smoothie cup. "I have carried this for 5 years," she said. For 5 years, she had watched Dorotha play the perfect grandmother, while secretly knowing the horrifying truth. Vivian took the bag, her own hands trembling. The timid woman who always faded into the background was gone. In her place was a survivor, hardened by years of quiet suffering. "Now," Carolyn said, her eyes filled with cold determination, "I want to help you destroy her." "I was never able to get pregnant again," Caroline said, her voice hollow. 5 years we tried. The doctors found nothing wrong, but it never worked. Her expression hardened. "Whatever she put in that drink, she destroyed more than my baby. She stole my chance to ever be a mother." Vivian reached out and took her hand. "We are going to make her pay," she promised. "How?" Caroline asked, her voice full of despair. "She's untouchable." Vivian's eyes were like steel. "I am an FBI agent, even on administrative leave. With your story and my evidence, we have enough to finally bring her down." With this proof, they would have to listen. Caroline looked at Vivian, a glimmer of hope in her eyes, for the first time in years. "What do you need?" she asked. Vivian replied, "Everything. The smoothie container, the photos, your journal." She paused. "And I need your help finding other victims. We need a case so strong it cannot be ignored." A real smile finally broke across Caroline's face. "I already have a list." That night, holding the evidence bag, Vivian felt the baby kick. She pressed a hand to her stomach. "We are going to be okay," she whispered. She was not alone anymore. She had an ally. The investigation was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, Vivian felt hope. The next morning, Margot Dawson called at 8:42. "I found something," she said. It was a witness statement from 1987, connected to Dorothea's first husband. A housekeeper named Eleanor Mitchell saw something suspicious just before he died. "The report is vague," Margot explained, "but Eleanor is 83 and sharp as a tack. She lives in a Florida retirement home, and the nurses say she remembers everything." Vivian knew she had to talk to her. I had to speak with her. But my boss, Margot, reminded me I was on leave. I lied, calling it a personal visit to a family friend. She saw right through it. Instead of the long drive, she arranged a video call. It was safer for me and the baby. At 2:15 that afternoon, an elderly woman appeared on my screen. Her name was Eleanor Mitchell. She had sharp blue eyes and a story she had been waiting 40 years to tell. "You are the FBI agent who married a Hartwell," Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly strong. She told me she had been keeping track of the family for decades. Every illness, every accident, every death. She was their housekeeper from 1981 to 1988. She remembered Richard Hartwell as a truly good man, kind and generous, someone who treated his staff with respect and even helped pay for her daughter's college education. His wife, Dorotha, was another story entirely. Eleanor described her as cold and calculating, obsessed with appearances. Her opinion changed forever 1 week before Mr. Richard died. Eleanor had gone back to the house at 4 in the morning to get something she had forgotten. She let herself in quietly, not wanting to disturb anyone. That is when she saw Mrs. Dorotha standing at the kitchen counter, holding a small, unlabeled bottle made of brown glass. She watched as Dorotha carefully poured a greenish liquid into Mr. Richard's coffee maker. He made a pot at the same time every single morning. It was his daily ritual, and his wife knew it. Eleanor could not see exactly what it was, but the woman was measuring it drop by drop. Terrified, Eleanor slipped out unnoticed. She tried to tell herself she had imagined it, but then she watched Mr. Richard get sick that week. His kidneys started to fail, and the doctors had no explanation. After he died, Eleanor went straight to the police and told them what she saw. A detective took her statement and promised to investigate, but nothing ever happened. The case was closed, ruled natural causes. 2 months later, the detective retired with a full pension. Dorotha fired Eleanor, claiming she needed to cut costs. Then came a letter from a lawyer, a veiled threat reminding her about a confidentiality agreement and the consequences of spreading rumors. For 40 years, Eleanor stayed quiet, but she never forgot. She showed me a worn leather journal. Inside were decades of notes and newspaper clippings. It was a horrifying record of every suspicious death or illness connected to the Hartwell family. She opened it, showing page after page of details. A brother-in-law who died after refusing Dorotha a loan. A board member who died after blocking a deal she wanted. Young women who dated her sons and became mysteriously ill. This was 40 years of watching, of knowing a monster was getting away with murder. Eleanor said she had prayed someone would one day be strong enough to stop her, and she was ready to testify. After the call, I knew I finally had a case. My colleague Margot started digging. She found financial motives. The dead brother-in-law had a $300,000 life insurance policy. His wife, Dorotha's sister, loaned Dorotha $50,000 shortly after. The dead board member, David Porter, had been blocking a deal worth $5 million to the family foundation. After he died, the deal went through. Margot knew this could end her career if we were wrong, but she agreed to take the evidence to our boss, Cade. That night, Cade called me. He had seen the file. His voice was sharp. He said the evidence was compelling, and the pattern was undeniable. He cleared me for limited duty ordering me to his office Monday morning. Finally, after all this time, the wheels of justice were starting to turn. As I sat there with all the evidence, I felt no sense of victory. Being right could not bring back the lives that were lost. It could not undo 40 years of pain. All it could do was promise that the person responsible would finally face the truth. The case moved with incredible speed. In just a few weeks, federal warrants led to the exhumation of Dorothea's past husbands. The toxicology reports were undeniable. After 37 years, Richard Hartwell's bones still held traces of poison. James Manning and David Porter showed the same results. It was a pattern of murder spanning decades, finally brought to light. On December 23rd, the warrant for Dorothea Hartwell was signed. "We have enough," her boss, Katie, told her. His voice was heavy. 3 counts of first-degree murder. My mother-in-law was a serial killer, and I was about to expose her at her own Christmas party. The federal agent, Kyde, laid out the charges. 2 counts of attempted murder, with more to come. We planned to move on Christmas Eve during her lavish annual gathering. With 50 of her high society friends watching, she would have nowhere to hide. Cade asked if I was sure I wanted to be there. This was personal, and that was exactly why I had to see it through. My husband Grant called later, for the first time in 3 weeks. He sounded broken. He said federal agents were everywhere, asking what was happening. I stood in the empty house we once shared and told him I was just doing my job. He was in disbelief. "They say Mom is being arrested for murder," he stammered. I confirmed it was true and that there was no mistake. We had 40 years of evidence, from lab results to witness testimony. A heavy silence fell between us. Then his voice cracked. "I should have believed you," he whispered. "I should have listened." He asked if he could come over, if we could talk. For so many nights, I had dreamed of him choosing me. But that time had passed. "Not tonight," I said, my voice firm. "I have work to do." I hung up the phone before he could reply. The Hartwell estate was glowing with fairy lights when we arrived. Through the windows, we could see crystal chandeliers and a string quartet playing for the wealthy guests. I stood at the edge of the property, my FBI badge clipped to my jacket, feeling my 8-month-old baby kick. At 8 o'clock, we moved in. As the front doors opened, the warmth and laughter of the party washed over us. But the moment I walked in with 6 federal agents, the room fell silent. 50 shocked faces turned to stare as they realized what was happening. Dorothea Hartwell stood by a massive Christmas tree, a perfect picture of elegance in a red velvet dress. When her eyes met mine and saw the badges, her champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. My voice was steady and clear as it echoed across the silent room. "Dorothea Hartwell, you are under arrest for the murders of Richard Hartwell, James Manning, and David Porter." I continued, listing the charges of attempted murder against her granddaughter and me. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I informed her of her rights. Shock turned to fury on Dorothea's face. "This is absurd," she hissed, her voice like ice. "I will have your badge for this. I will destroy you." I calmly stepped forward and told her about the evidence we had, from the poison in the Thanksgiving gravy to toxicology reports from 3 exhumed bodies. Her mocking laughter stopped when I mentioned a key witness. "From Eleanor Mitchell," I said. "Your former housekeeper. She saw what you did to your husband 40 years ago." For the first time, true fear flickered in Dorothea's eyes. "That is impossible," she whispered, her composure gone. I informed her that confidentiality agreements do not cover criminal acts. "You have been getting away with murder for 40 years, Dorothea," I said softly. "That ends tonight." As 2 agents moved in with handcuffs, she finally broke. She screamed, "Do you know who I am?" She raged about her power, her charity, and her influence. The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. She was a cornered animal, disbelief warring with pure rage. She spun toward me, her face twisted with hate. "You think you have won," she spat, threatening me and my unborn baby. I had ordered the agents to get her out of there. She was still screaming threats as they led her away, convinced her money could save her. It would not. As the guests quickly fled, the grand estate felt cold and empty. The fairy lights twinkled on, but the magic was gone. I felt no triumph, only a deep and profound exhaustion. Alone, in the library, I walked to the Christmas tree. I found the ornament with Grant's name on it, made when he was 5 years old, the year his father died. Dorothea only had ornaments for her sons. Everyone else was disposable. I took the small, cold ornament and put it in my pocket. It was a piece of the boy he was, before his mother twisted him into a man who could not stand for what was right. The trial began in March. Dorothea pleaded not guilty and hired a team of the best lawyers money could buy. But the evidence was overwhelming. A doctor explained the science, proving Dorothea had used poison for decades. Then, Eleanor Mitchell, now 83 years old, took the stand. Her voice was clear and steady as she described the day she saw Dorothea poison her first husband's coffee 40 years ago. The defense tried to claim her memory was unreliable. Eleanor looked them right in the eye. "I have been waiting 40 years to tell this story," she said. "I remember every single detail." The jury agreed, and justice was finally served. On the stand, Caroline finally told her story. She talked about the poisoned smoothie, the child she lost, and the 5 years she spent terrified to speak the truth. The defense lawyers called her a bitter, unstable woman who was just looking for someone to blame. But Caroline stood firm, her voice shook, but her words were strong. She said, "She took my baby, and then she stole my chance to ever have another." Then it was Vivian's turn. For 6 grueling hours, she laid out every piece of evidence detailing Dorothea's cruelty. The defense tried to twist her into a vengeful federal agent, a liar blinded by pregnancy hormones. But Vivian remained calm, answering every question with unshakable clarity. The lawyer asked if it was true that she and Dorothea had a difficult relationship. Vivian looked at the jury and said, "It is true she never accepted me. It is also true that she tried to murder me and my unborn child." The lawyer scoffed, asking if they were really supposed to believe a beloved community philanthropist was a secret killer. Vivian's reply was ice cold. "I expect the jury to believe the evidence. The lab reports, the witnesses, the money trail, and the long line of suspicious deaths that spanned 4 decades. She held his gaze. "The evidence was always there. I am just the first person who chose to listen." For 3 long days, the jury deliberated. During that time, Vivian gave birth to a healthy baby girl she named Elise Margot, in honor of the one person who had believed her from the start. Then the call came. The verdict was in. Holding baby Elise in a carrier, Vivian walked into the packed courtroom, her hands steady. The air was thick with tension. The jury filed in, their faces giving nothing away. The foreman stood. "On the count of murder in the first degree, in the death of Richard Hartwell, we find the defendant guilty." A gasp swept the room. "On the count of murder in the first degree in the death of James Manning, we find the defendant guilty." Dorothea's face turned white as a sheet. One by one, the foreman read the verdicts. Guilty of murder. Guilty of attempted murder. Guilty on every single charge. At that moment, Dorothea's perfect mask finally shattered. She leaped to her feet, screaming that it was all a conspiracy, that Vivian had destroyed her family. The irony was lost on no one. The judge slammed his gavel, demanding order, but Dorothea kept shouting about all the money she had given to charity, as if that could buy her innocence. The judge was unmoved. The evidence was undeniable. 2 weeks later, at the sentencing, Dorothea was given life in prison without any possibility of parole. She did not scream this time. She sat, with perfect posture, her head held high, wrapped in a cloak of pride. She was dragged away by the guards, fighting and cursing them the whole way. As they led her out, her eyes locked with Vivian's. "This is not over," she mouthed. Vivian looked right back at her, unafraid, and whispered, "Yes, it is." After it was all done, Vivian sat in the hallway with Margot, watching her daughter sleep. She expected to feel a sense of victory, but instead, she just felt hollow. She told Margot it did not feel like winning. Margot nodded wisely. "Sometimes," she said, "justice is not a feeling. It is just the absence of injustice. It is stopping the wrong thing from happening anymore." When Vivian asked where she heard that, Margot grinned. "I read it in a fortune cookie." Against all odds, Vivian smiled. Grant was waiting for her outside. He looked like a wreck, unshaven and exhausted. For 3 months, he had watched his entire life get torn apart, learning that his mother was a monster and his childhood was a lie. "Vivian," he started, his voice cracking, "I should have believed you." Vivian's voice was flat. "Yes, you should have." He pleaded, saying he had been blind, that he could not see his mother for who she truly was. He took a step forward, asking if they could please try to fix things, to be a family again. Vivian looked at the man she had loved, the man who had abandoned her when she needed him most. She thought about all the lonely, terrifying nights she had endured while he stayed with his mother. "No," she said, her voice soft but final. "That woman you married, the one who trusted you completely, she is gone. I cannot be her anymore." Grant insisted Elise was his daughter too. Vivian agreed they would share custody fairly, that she would never keep their daughter from him. "But us?" she said, meeting his gaze. "That ended the moment you chose your mother over me. You called me paranoid. You left me alone and pregnant while I was fighting for our child's life." Tears streamed down Grant's face as he whispered he was sorry. "I know you are," Vivian said gently. "But sorry does not fix this. It does not rebuild my trust." She turned to leave, then paused. "You are not your mother, Grant. You are not evil, but you are weak. You let her control you, and until you figure out who you are without her, you are not someone I can be with." She walked away and never looked back. 6 months later, Vivian was in a new apartment. It was smaller, but it was all hers. The walls of Elise's room were painted a hopeful sage green. Photos of their new, happy life were everywhere. There were pictures of Margot, Caroline, and Eleanor, all holding the baby they had helped protect. Her life was finally her own. The divorce was finalized in July. Grant had moved away and was in therapy. He was trying to be a better man, and Vivian could see it. Maybe one day they could be friends, but they would never be husband and wife again. One Tuesday morning, her boss, Agent Consincade, called her into his office. As she walked in, leaving Elise at the office daycare, he motioned for her to sit. "How is the baby?" he asked with a smile. Vivian smiled back. "She is growing, crawling, and putting everything in her mouth." Her life was finally moving forward, filled with hope and peace. 6 months later, Vivian's daughter was keeping her up at night. Her boss, Consincade, just smiled. "I have something for you," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. Inside was a promotion to supervisory special agent. "You earned it, Hartwell. That case opened our eyes to crimes we were missing." Vivian looked at the paperwork. This was everything she had worked for. "I have one condition," she said. "I want to lead a task force dedicated to domestic poisoning. We need to help the victims no one else believes." Consincade listened as she described the hidden crimes and the powerful people who commit them. "Write a proposal," he said. I will take it to the director. A year after that terrible Thanksgiving, Dorothea was in a maximum security prison with no chance of parole. The Hartwell empire was gone, but Vivian's work was just starting. Her task force was approved, and her team was already handling cases from all over the country. She couldn't save everyone, but she was saving the ones nobody else saw. On Thanksgiving Day, Vivian's apartment was filled with laughter. Around her table sat Margot, a glowing Caroline with her new husband, and Eleanor, who flew up from Florida. There were also new friends from a support group Vivian had started. In her high chair, her 14-month-old daughter, Elise, was happily covering herself in mashed potatoes. Vivian laughed, a deep, genuine laugh she thought she had lost forever. She has good aim, Margot noted with a smile. For the first time in a very long time, everything felt right. Vivian stood before the friends who believed her when no one else did. Her baby, Elise, happily tossed food. "A year ago," Vivian said, "I thought family meant blood. I was wrong." She met their eyes. Real family are the people who fight beside you, not against you. She raised her glass. "To my daughter, who made me brave, and to second chances." The room filled with laughter. Later that night, Vivian saw a new woman in her reflection. She was not the scared person waiting for a husband to believe her. She realized she never needed saving, only the courage to fight for herself. In the nursery, she watched her 14-month-old daughter sleep. "You will always know your worth," Vivian whispered. "You will trust your instincts and never let anyone make you doubt the truth," she promised, "and you will always fight back." This was the story of Vivian Hartwell, who proved that true monsters can hide behind a perfect smile. If you cheered when the handcuffs clicked shut on Christmas Eve, please hit the like button. Have you ever had a gut feeling that others called crazy? Tell me your story in the comments below. Share this with someone who needs to know their instincts matter. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this. Remember, the most dangerous thing you can do is silence your own voice. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful lessons and inspiration. Thank you for watching until the end.